රිවයින් කරන්න පුළුවන් නිසා මුකුත් මගේ වෙන්නේ.
BOTV TV බලන හොඳම විදිහ.
Good evening tonight. Waves of an expose. New York Times reveals of a deal with previous Mahinda Rajapaksa government and China entrapping the country in debt. Members of the former government refutes claim.
This article that appeared on New York Times on 25th June about Hambantota port is typical fake news that American President Donald Trump is talking about.
Kidney health. President Maithripala Sirisena visits the construction site of National Kidney Hospital in Polonnaruwa to see the progress. Polls this year. The chairman of the Election Commission meets Speaker Karu Jayasuriya and several others to discuss overdue provincial council elections. Guidance for the youth. World Bank's country director for Sri Lanka emphasizes the need for the Sri Lankan youth to redefine the perception of an employment opportunity.
We need them to push the policymakers and private sector and the public sector to lift hurdles in their way.
And in international headlines, will not budge. China will not give up an inch of territory in the Pacific. Chinese President Xi tells US Defense Secretary. It is 9 o'clock on the dot. This is First at 9 on Other Derana 24/7, Sri Lanka's news channel. Hello everyone, I'm Mahesh Johnny. British Prime Minister Theresa May has been put on notice by the EU to speed up Brexit negotiations. That story coming up on our international segment. But first, we begin with the New York Times expose. Today, when the New York Times was printed and distributed across the world, there was an article related to Sri Lanka. This article exposes certain deals that took place during the tenure of the previous government that allowed China to take control of certain economical aspects in the country. It also alleges that China funded the failed presidential campaign of former President Mahinda Rajapaksa in order to secure certain deals. As you can imagine, this expose did indeed manage to get responses from various quarters in the political and social arenas.
Yesterday, the New York Times carried an expose written by Maria Abi Habib, its South Asia correspondent, under the title, How China Got Sri Lanka to Cough Up a Port. The expose talks about several things, from how the previous government disregarded recommendations by various international and local experts who said that the Hambantota port project would not be financially viable. The expose quotes the former Indian Foreign Secretary Shiva Shankar Menon as saying they approached us for the port at the beginning. An Indian company said no, it was an economic dud then, and it's an economic dud now. The main areas of focus on the expose breaks down into several points. Mainly, it speaks about how the Chinese government funded the botched presidential campaign of former President Mahinda Rajapaksa in 2015 in order to ensure that their agreement with the Rajapaksa regime continues without hindrance. It also speaks about how China agreed to provide financial support to the Hambantota port under the guise of getting a strategic upper hand military and financially that would enable them to operate at the doorstep of India. Further, it says when Sri Lanka couldn't make the intended financial profits from these projects, how China came as its saving grace, but with harsher dealings and demands that would profit China at the end.
It was a commercial transaction which the government of the day deemed to be beneficial to Sri Lanka. There was certainly no question of a threat. This is an absolute insult to the government of China. China does not deal with other countries in that way, nor does Sri Lanka as a sovereign state succumb to threats of any sort. It is an astonishing fabrication. So all we have to say is that these are desperate attempts on the part of the current government to distract public attention from a series of scandals which have rocked the government to its foundations. With every passing day, more and more layers of the central bank scam are coming to light. Sums of this magnitude had been paid into accounts here. There would be a paper trail.
The article further goes on to say that under the Rajapaksa regime, the country's debt had increased therefold to $44.8 billion when he left office.
This article tries to give the impression that China lended money at very high interest rates. Again, factually incorrect, because it's only the first tranche of 300 million or so, which came at about 6% interest, which is high, of course. But thereafter, they gave the balance at such low rates, the overall interest, average interest came to about 3.2%. How much money was borrowed for this? It is $1,250 million. And with accumulated interest, the total amount that was to be repaid to China after about 27 years was $1,750 million. When this government came to power in 2015, the Ports Authority has already repaid almost $500 million out of that. So that by that time the port had been functioning only for 2 or 3 years. It had barely started making money. Still, $500 million US dollars were already repaid. So what's the problem? If the port was functioning, within 6 or 7 years, the total amount would have been repaid.
In an email communication with First at 9, New York Times correspondent Maria Abi Habib said that it is the responsibility of the previous government to provide responses to these allegations, despite her failing to obtain their response.
If you read through the article, you will realize that it is a two-pronged attack, one on China, the other one on Sri Lanka. Mainly on China, because I think this particular newspaper or this reporter wishes to show China as one of these really terrible countries which has gone and taken over other countries, and shown Sri Lanka as being a country that had got trapped into providing them with the assets as a result of the debt overtaking them, both of which are untrue.
Speaking exclusively to First at 9, the former governor of the central bank, Ajit Niwad Kabral, says that the previous government did the needful assessment prior to commissioning the port.
There was never anyone saying that the Hambantota port was a dud project. It is one of the most important projects, and that is why the Chinese are willing to pay $1 billion and take it over today. If it was, who is going to pay $1 billion and take over a project which is a dud? So that's actually a canard, and that is being said in order to sell it. This government sold that port, and to sell the port, they sold the story to the country to saying it is a dud project.
I think one thing is very clear, that we got into debts to do with the Hambantota port and the Hambantota airport, which were not economically viable. These were pre-Belt Road initiatives taken by China, right? And we should never get into debt on economically and financially non-viable projects. The Chinese subsequently invested in a terminal in the port of Colombo, which was a very commercially viable investment. And that investment, the Chinese investment, is doing very well. So it is a pre-BRI lesson that there should be investments only where there should be commercial returns. We must remember that not only borrowers, lenders are also responsible when they give money. So we were in this unenviable position that we had large debts that had to be serviced without any returns. The present government took the debt and converted it to equity. So these were very poor decisions taken by the former regime, right? And there are lessons to everybody in this, not just to Sri Lanka, even to the lenders, that this kind of situation must not arise in the future.
However, despite this, expose tries to showcase that Sri Lanka is under China's thumb when it comes to the amount of debt owed to China. The central bank report for 2017 shows that it's only a mere 4.2% of the total debt.
The article states that Sri Lanka is now more in debt to China than ever before. The reality is a bit more complicated. Certainly, Sri Lanka has a debt problem. However, of the high level of debt that it has, only a relatively small percentage still is owned by China. So the numbers are approximately $3.5 to $4 billion of debt, which comes to around approximately 6% of total debt. Now that may increase, and we certainly have to watch our debt repayment capacity.
Dr. Panditaratna further emphasized that it is important for governments to consider the processes and terms when obtaining loans, and it is therefore necessary to set clear standards when dealing with relevant countries.
My own view is that the article presents quite detailed evidence of self-dealing, and it's important to investigate all such claims of self-dealing. I mean, self-dealing whether in the context of a corporation or of a national government, is never a good thing. It's something that is against the larger national interest. And it's not really a question of politics, it's a question of principle. Amount of China's debt is often overstated. That said, it's not so much a question of amounts as about the processes and the terms of the loans. It's in Sri Lanka's interest to pursue and set clear standards of how they go about getting loans from any source. And right now, we are somewhat lacking in that. And one thing that Sri Lanka can do is to insist that China sticks to its own standards, in a way, the AIIB standards.
Well, politicians also express views with regard to this New York Times article.
As far as I know, this investigation has been underway, but it is halted now. I contacted the journalist called Maria who wrote this article. What they say is that they have made the revelation, now it is up to us to proceed. I challenged those concerned to hand over an affidavit claiming they didn't accept money from China Merchant and China Harbour companies. They can even seek compensation for defamation worth millions. 3.5 years have passed since the election, and it is only now they level allegations of giving money. If there is such an allegation, work accordingly. Since people were arrested for distributing seal attire, why can't they take measures for using money directly given for election campaigns? Those who try to be sanctimonious know that fraud was committed. Even we are surprised at some cases being postponed every 3 months. One can ask as to why measures are not taken against these incidents. We are taking measures to expedite cases by establishing special courts. On one hand, he spent people's money, and on the other, he used it for his own campaign. Some countries, businessmen and banks have connections with Gotabe and Mahinda Rajapaksa. They are funded by these entities to return to power. The government can conduct necessary investigations on these incidents.
In other local stories, President Maithripala Sirisena engaged in an observational tour at the construction site of the National Kidney Hospital in Polonnaruwa today. It is to be built as the largest kidney hospital in Southeast Asia with the assistance of the Chinese government at a cost of 12 billion rupees. A hospital due to be completed in July of 2020 will boast 200 beds, 100 blood infiltration machines and a surgery with state-of-the-art facilities. Later, President Sirisena also arrived at the tank Parakrama Samudra and had candid dialogue with devotees who were visiting historic and sacred sites in Polonnaruwa. Federation of National Organizations points the finger at the government, alleging that it weakened military intelligence services, leading to terror organizations like the LTTE lifting its head once more in the country. Speaking at a media briefing held in Colombo today, one of the Federation's members, retired Rear Admiral Sarath Weerasekara, said instances of LTTE uprising being concealed from the public will only plunge national security into grave danger.
Now we feel that the terrorists are again raising their ugly head. After we won the war, what we did first and foremost was to strengthen the intelligence service. Because the terrorists, although they have lost the war, they have never given up their Elam dream. We have destroyed only the tail of the tiger. The head of the tiger is still in Canada. Their arms are in other Western countries. Because of that only, that we have strengthened the intelligence service. But what this government did, no sooner they came to power, is to demoralize all the intelligence personnel. They remanded them without any evidence, and they have totally weakened the entire intelligence service. So in 2014, because we have strengthened the intelligence service, on 3 occasions we were able to discover and crush the LTT attempts to raise their ugly head. And at that time, the intelligence head was Brigadier Saleh. Now this government, no sooner they came to power, they transferred him out. That was the beginning of weakening the intelligence service. So as long as they hide this information from the public, the national security is in grave danger.
Well, Chairman of the Elections Commission, Mahinda Deshapriya, sees an election on the horizon as he believes that the government will move to hold an election within this year. He expressed these views on the matter following a discussion chaired by Speaker of Parliament Karu Jayasuriya today.
A discussion was convened by the Speaker of Parliament Karu Jayasuriya today at the parliamentary premises on the upcoming provincial council elections. Minister of Provincial Councils and Local Government Faiza Mustafa, Chairman of the Election Commission Mahinda Deshapriya, along with several officials of the Commission, the Chairman of the Delimitation Committee Dr. Kethavalingam, as well as 2 other members of the committee were party to the discussion. In the meantime, a media communique was issued on the discussion by the media unit of the Speaker's office today. It says that the aim of the discussion was to lend the support of Parliament and the Constitutional Council towards holding the provincial council election whilst maintaining the trust of the public in people's franchise. The communique added that the attention of the discussion fell on the system under which the election will be held and that a special adjournment debate is scheduled for the 5th of July on the provincial council elections. The Speaker also calls on the Election Commission and the Delimitation Commission to pay attention to views expressed during the debate from various parties pertaining to anomalies in the electoral system and the delimitation process. The media communique goes on to say that attention has also been diverted towards holding a discussion on the provincial council election with the attendance of the Prime Minister and party leaders.
UPFA parliamentarian Bandula Gunawardena categorically denies the statement of Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, where the Premier said that the country's revenue is not sufficient to settle public debt run up by the previous government. The parliamentarian made the rejection today while speaking to media at the Ministry of Finance in Colombo.
UPFA parliamentarian Bandula Gunawardena arrived at the Ministry of Finance to obtain the official data pertaining to the country's economy. MP Gunawardena claimed that he requested the relevant details under the Right to Information Act as there are allegations misappropriating funds.
Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe keeps insisting that the government's revenue is not sufficient to settle debts and interests generated by loans of the Mahinda Rajapaksa government. It is an utter lie. Officials are also responsible in this regard. If the President and the Prime Minister quote wrong data and figures on the country's economy, officials who provide the details are also responsible. As a result of these inaccurate statements, the country's economy is faced with adverse consequences.
The Supreme Court today ordered the former Chief Minister of North Central Province, Special Jayaratne, to pay a sum of 250,000 rupees in compensation to a school principal for transferring him on unfair grounds. Principal of the Nivattaka Chetya Mahavidyalaya filed a fundamental rights petition against the former Chief Minister of North Central Province over a transfer handed to him in 2016. The petition cites failing to organize a foundation stone laying ceremony at the school in 2016 as cause for the transfer.
Watching Sri Lanka's award-winning news channel, Derana 24/7.
Welcome back. Business news now. World Bank's country director for Sri Lanka, Dr. Ida Swarai Ridiho, emphasizes the need for Sri Lankan youth to redefine the perception of a job and to push policymakers and both private and public sectors to remove hurdles which prevent them from becoming tomorrow's employers. She expressed these views addressing an event titled Sri Lanka Development Update held in Colombo today under the topic More and Better Jobs for an Upper Middle Income Country.
Today, in many middle-income countries, young people focus on jobs that allow them to innovate, that permit risk-taking, and many would not even consider being a lifer in a single job. This buzz has not yet taken root in Sri Lanka, despite its middle-income status. What I hear most from young people here when I speak to them is that they are conditioned by their parental influence to become doctors and lawyers, and then work in the public sector. The question I'm putting on the table is this the only future that our young can aspire for? My proposal, therefore, is that we need to redefine our perception of a job. We need youth to be at the forefront of creating jobs. We need them to push the policymakers and private sector and the public sector to lift hurdles in their way so they can go on and be tomorrow's employers and innovators. Does the education system as it is today permit the innovation and the skills development that is needed?
Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. Indrajith Kumars issued a statement today saying that former Minister of Finance Ravi Karunanayake is levelling unfounded allegations against one of his senior deputy governors without producing any evidence to back his allegations. In his statement, Dr. Kumars says that as the Governor of the Central Bank, he wants to formally place on record that senior deputy governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe is an outstanding economist who has made a stellar contribution to the work of the bank during the 2 years Dr. Kumaraswamy spent in his position. In addition, he says that he is compelled to point out that former Finance Minister Ravi Karunanayake has not produced any evidence to back up his unfounded allegations. Let's take you to the stock market now. Shares declined for a fourth straight session today and posted their lowest close in nearly 15 months. The all-share price index ended 0.11% weaker at 6,181.48, and the market turnover was at 1.3 billion rupees. Now here is Imeshi Fernando from the Colombo stock market for a detailed report.
The market capitalization at the end of the day was 2,887.61 billion rupees. Today's foreign purchases were 309.93 million rupees and foreign sales were 113.81 million rupees. There were 19 crossings today and the crossing turnover was 966.71 million rupees.
Watching Sri Lanka's premier news channel, Other Derana 24/7.
International news now. Chinese President Xi Jinping met with visiting U.S. Secretary of Defense James Mattis yesterday in Beijing. Xi said that the world is undergoing major developments, transformation and adjustment, and the trends of world multipolarization and economic globalization are developing in depth, and countries have become even more interdependent. While affirming its commitment to peace, Chinese president, however, said that the country will not give up even 1 inch of its territory.
Tensions between the United States and China are mounting over trade hostilities and China's increasingly assertive claims to territory in the South China Sea. U.S. Secretary of Defense James Mattis yesterday met Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing as part of a trip across Asia, meeting several regional U.S. allies. Mattis is the first Pentagon chief to visit China since 2014. Mattis said his talks with Xi and other officials yesterday had been very, very good, adding that the US was assigning a high degree of importance to the military relationship with China. Xi added that China had peaceful intentions, but reasserted his views that there would be no concession from China about what it considers to be Chinese territory. He said that China cannot lose even 1 inch of the territory left behind by its ancestors, adding what his other peoples, China, do not want at all. While saying that China-US relations are one of the most important bilateral ties in the world, Xi also said that China will neither pursue the path of expansionism and colonialism nor cause chaos to the world.
British Prime Minister Theresa May has been warned that time is running out to secure a Brexit deal as she prepares to face the other 27 EU leaders at a summit in Brussels. The British Prime Minister will brief all her counterparts for the last time before October, when both sides hope a deal will be done on with the UK's March 2019 departure. Our first at 9's Indivri Amwatha is in London and picks up this story for us tonight.
The Prime Minister, who has been under unrelenting pressure within her own party, has called her cabinet together for what has been billed as a make-or-break meeting at Chequers on 6 July to agree the UK's blueprint for its future relations with the EU. Divisions over the UK's customs arrangements after December 2020, when the transition period agreed with the EU is due to end, have yet to be resolved, as have arguments over the future movement of goods and people across the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Prime Minister Theresa May's former top aide, Nick Timothy, has urged her to face down her opponents in the cabinet, telling the Daily Telegraph here in the United Kingdom that the time for playing nice and being exploited is over. With less than 9 months to go before the UK's scheduled exit from the European Union, leading businesses have said the time has come for clarity and issued warnings about the impact on jobs of leaving the EU without an agreement. The Prime Minister will hold a number of face-to-face meetings with European counterparts on day one of the two-day summit, the main focus of which will be on the migration challenges facing Europe and Eurozone reform. The remaining 27 EU leaders will discuss Brexit on their own tomorrow morning, by which point Prime Minister May is expected to have left Brussels.
There's no expectation that the Prime Minister will arrive in Brussels with a magic key to unlock the Brexit process, but Theresa May heads to the Belgian capital with a promise that at least within 10 days she will have her cabinet agree more on the vision for the UK's life outside the European Union. Indira Yamu after reporting from London for First at 9.
Well, Joe Jackson, the patriarch of an American musical dynasty who started his son Michael and his Jackson 5 brothers on the road to stardom, but also verbally and physically abused them, has died at the age of 89 yesterday. Jackson, who lived in Las Vegas, has been estranged from much of his family, had been suffering from cancer.
You are watching Sri Lanka's #1 news channel, Other Derana 24/7.
A very good evening to our viewers and welcome to Forecast First. Starting off with your temperatures for tomorrow, they are to vary between 20 and 34 degrees Celsius, with the highest of 34 degrees Celsius expected in Mullaitivu and Batticaloa. Well, when looking at the map, a low pressure zone will develop in the western province and will gradually disappear. Well, tomorrow will be a sunny day for the areas of Jaffna, Mena and Anuradhapura. The areas of Vaunia, Kandy, Colombo, Galle and Matara as well as Hambantota will however experience showers. That's all from the Weather Centre tonight. Up next is your city by city forecast.
And that is a part of your world tonight right here on Other Derana 24/7, Sri Lanka's news channel. I'm Mahesh Johnny. Before we go, we like to take you to the beach in Eraur, located about 15 kilometers northwest of Batticaloa and is a favorite destination of local and foreign tourists. Thank you very much for joining us. Good night.
Bringing you the news and information 24 hours a day. This is Sri Lanka's premier news channel, Other Derana 24/7.